let's all learn how to spell his name.
Virgil
No
Thomson.
P. There is no P in Thompson, and there is no E in Copeland. So let's all get with the program. All right, I want to play some of this music that we're going to listen to in a different context, but I want you to get a little familiar with it and start to think about it before we see it in its original context. Everyone please give a listen to this and think about what's going on. Now, once again, I want to tell you that all the other years I've taught this course, which is about 30, I have made students write about things because I believe that the only way that you can demonstrate to me that you're thinking is by doing something and having some physical evidence of it. But I simply have so much to do that I simply cannot grade 75 more essays, so you get off the hook. You get a break. But the important point is that I want you to process this and think about this, so we're going to have a conversation when this is over, so everyone be ready to stand and deliver. So here is some music for your consideration. Good Southern Baptist in the room? What is this? You know this? At one time, everyone who in that denomination would have known that this is the hymn tune, "My shepherd shall supply my need." All right, what are you thinking about when you hear this kind of music? You hear them? I believe there's some references to the American Indian and that falling third that is so characteristic of American Indian melodies. You hear the tom-tom in the background. Does this music make you happy? What's this? Miss Cornelison. It is the banjo. And where does the banjo, where is our association? What song is he parodying? Didn't you come from Alabama with a banjo on your knee? Who wrote that? All right, what's Virgil Thomson doing? Is this music in sonata form? Is this concert music? What do you think's going on here? How is this nationalistic? Miss Matthews?
It's kind of showing different types of music.
Okay. Different types of what kind of music?
Well, they have the American Indian, they showed that.
American music. So here we have initially composers who are following Dvorak's advice, and they're going to take up African American music and American Indian music. But by this point, and this is a pal of Aaron Copland, he is embracing all of American music history to communicate the essence of our nation in music. So there's reference to hymn tunes. We've studied them. There's references to the minstrel show and Stephen Foster. We've studied it. There's references to the American Indians. There's going to be references to popular dances, popular songs. And the whole point of this is to communicate a feeling of our country, because this is going to be one of the interesting new watermarks in the history of music, and that is the idea of virtual music. Mr. Park, what is virtual music?
I would assume it's something that has to do with the idealization of American music.
Well, I think it has to do with this simple fact. I want you to think about this. For most of the history of the world, the performance of music was in a social setting, and it was created under live circumstances. Much of the music that we all know and love was originally intended to be performed in a live situation with musicians and their instruments and people listening to them. Because of the technology of the 20th century, this pattern that was centuries old is going to change. And that is, we are going to have music frozen in time that is going to be the same every time it is performed, and in fact was never conceived to be performed in some kind of concert situation. Because what I'm going to introduce you to is one of the first important film scores in the history of the world. And even though most of us associate film scores with the popular tradition, there were people at the beginning who were part of the fine art culture who helped point the way for other people to operate. Now, it's important that you understand the construction of history. I've spoken about this a number of times, but one of the most important ideas in the old-fashioned system was that certain kinds of ideas were privileged. The kind of music that was taken seriously was the kind that was performed in public by professionals. The history of music, for most of its history, has been the history of that body of music. The history of music in the films was not considered at all, because those composers were thought to be utilitarian hacks who were providing a service for people who were making movies, okay? But I would argue to you that in the 20th century, more people have heard more music in movie theaters than they've heard in the concert hall. And every major musical idea that has in fact been disseminated to the people have been disseminated to more people in the movie theater than in the concert hall. So the composers ultimately figured this out, And so they would write music for the theater, but it had to be performed in a concert hall to be taken seriously by the historians. And so they would separate the music from its original purpose and make a concert suite and have that music performed in a live situation, when initially it was intended to be performed as the background for a film. So the other interesting thing is, how is the music organized? Well, the music is organized by non-musical information. It is organized by the images in the film. So we're turning things around. Instead of things making necessarily musical sense, in musical syntax, we have a new external that is going to help us organize how music unfolds. Now, Virgil Thomson. Virgil Thomson was born in Kansas City. He studied there. He went to Harvard. He learned from the Second New England School. And he too, like Aaron Copland, went to Paris. And in Paris, he found Nadia Boulanger. You know all about her. So he comes back, he and Copland come back to the United States and, in fact, help create a body of American music. We're going to watch a documentary film from 1938 that was commissioned by the United States government. And I want you to understand how remarkable this was in its time. When students have written about this for me in the past, they've always said it was cheesy and primitive, just because it didn't have all the fancy computer morphing that you people think have to be a part of every movie. Just because something doesn't have the standards that you're accustomed to doesn't mean that it's not important. In a certain sense, this is precious. Just the very fact that we have this. 90% of all the movies that have ever been made have disintegrated. We don't have them anymore. Okay? So, we don't look down on the music of Johann Sebastian Bach because he was primitive. Why would we look down on something from 1938 simply because it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of 2010? So this is a documentary film about a social problem, and I want you to think about that problem and how it is attacked or how it is addressed. And I want you to consider the people who are viewing this for the first time and what kind of impact this experience might have on them. There are three aspects of this. The first are the images themselves. And some of you are likely to see some things that you've never seen before. Second is the narration. The narration is important because it communicates words. Words have thoughts. And this narration is treated in a semi-poetic way that I want you to take seriously. And finally, there is the music. And I think that when we've all experienced this, we're going to understand that the most powerful mechanism by which the viewers of this film initially might have been touched by it is not so much because of the images, not so much because of the narration, but in fact because of the music. Because the government is trying to change people's minds. This is a propaganda film. The purpose of this film was to get Americans to change their mind. And some people say, well, why would the government want people to change their minds? And how dare the government to make a documentary film to change people's minds? Governments have been changing people's minds since there have been governments. And music has been political since there has been music. So all music of all times and all places is political, and nationalistic music is more political than just about any other kind. So 1938, The River, music by Virgil Thomson.